Recording in progress.
The thing that's different about a verbal vacation.
Sabi nila'y di tayo para sa isa't isa, dahil pareho lang tayong dalawa. Walang patutunguhan mula sa umpisa, ang pagsasama daw na di tugma. Ito ang tinura ng nagkukunwang banal at tunay na kapos sa pagmamahal. Ito ang tinura ng nagkukunwang matwid, na ang puso't damdamin manhid. Pagkat tayong dalawa'y nagmamahalang lubos, hangarin sa isa't isa'y tapat. Ipaglalaban natin, panalangin pipiguin, mapanghusgang mundo'y babaguhin. Sabi nila'y di tayo magiging masaya sa isang pagtitingin ng di tama. Di raw kaaya-aya sa mata ng may likha, kasalanan daw ating ginagawa. Ito ang tinura ng nagkukunwang marangal, na siyang yumuyurak sa ating dangal. Ito ang tinura ng nagkukunwang malinis, na puno ng dumi ang isip. Pagkat tayong dalawa'y nagmamahalang lubos, hangarin sa isa't isa'y tapat. Ipaglalaban natin, panalangin pipiguin, mapanghusgang mundo'y babaguhin. Pagkat tayong dalawa'y nagmamahalang lubos, hangarin sa isa't isa'y tapat. Ipaglalaban natin, panalangin pipiguin, mapanghusgang mundo'y babaguhin. Mapanghusgang mundo'y babaguhin.
Everyone.
Hi, I'm Johnny with Migrant Portland, and I'll be doing Di Pangkaraniwan by Danny Fabella in remembrance of Ka Joma. Kayong ang ligaya ay nasang ngiti ng bawat dukat tabi. Walang hinahangad na gantimpala, kundi ang makitang bayan ay malaya. Walang katumbas ni anumang halaga, dakila ninyong gawa. Mabuhay kayong hadipang karaniwan, pag-ibig ninyo ay wala hangganan. Mabuhay kayong lubos ang katapatan, mabuhay kayo kailanman. Kahanga-hanga kayong bumabago sa lipunan at sa mundo. Ang kabuluhan ninyo'y mamamalagi at di maitatanggi. Sa bawat pahina ng kasaysayan ay ginton talang laging masisilayan, at ang kahulugan sa may hirap, liwanag ng isang bagong bukas. Mabuhay kayong mga hadipang karaniwan, pag-ibig ninyo ay wala hangganan. Mabuhay kayong lubos ang katapatan, mabuhay kayo kailanman. Mabuhay kayong mga hadipang karaniwan, pag-ibig ninyo ay wala hangganan. Mabuhay kayong lubos ang katapatan, mabuhay kayo, mabuhay kayo, mabuhay kayo kailanman.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for that beautiful opening to our Ka Joma Lives tribute to a revolutionary. Hello, everybody. My name is Rhonda Ramiro. I'm currently the chair of Bion USA and a member of the steering committee of the International League People's Struggle US chapter. I'm very honored to be one of your co-hosts today, and would like to also pass it off and introduce my fellow co-hosts. Cody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Cody Urban, and with Rhonda, I serve on the steering committee for the International League of People's Struggle US country chapter, as well as the International Coordinating Committee of the ILPS.
And hello, everyone. Yeah, what an honor it is to be here with you all today. My name is Sam Miller. I'm here in Portland, Oregon with People Organizing for Philippine Solidarity, a member organization of the Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle.
And we're very honored to be joined by so many people who would like to pay tribute to Ka Joma, including our kasama, Julieta de Lima. I'm so honored that you're here. I didn't think that I would get choked up today as the co-host. I hope you'll forgive me for that. It's just an honor to have known Ka Joma and to be a part of this movement that he helped to inspire around the world. Today, we will be happy to share with you all a bit about Joma's life, his teachings, his inspiration to us all with a program of cultural performances, speakers, and some videos with Joma himself speaking to us about his many contributions to the struggle of the Filipino people for liberation, for the struggle of all peoples in the world for liberation from imperialism and all oppression. And a few words from him also about what kept him going all those years. We had planned to have an opening to ground us in grieving and in honoring our martyrs. Our speaker, however, for that, just informed us that they came down with COVID and will not be able to join us today. And that's just part of the reality that we're in these days. So we are going to move directly into some words from Ka Joma himself about the founding of the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army, and setting the path for the National Democratic Movement on the correct path for the liberation of the country. So I would like to invite our tech moderator to please start us off with a very special video of Joma himself speaking to us about the founding.
You know, the re-establishment of the Communist Party was not done on a single day. Practically, we had more than 2 years to prepare for the rebuilding of the party. The need to re-establish the Communist Party of the Philippines arose from the break within the old Communist Party. It was December 1962 na. Nakabalik na ako from Indonesia, nakausap na ako, at doon ako na-recruit, no? At pumayag ako, no? Sa gulat ko, at the age of only 23, ilinagay na ako sa Executive Committee para sa kabataan. Executive Committee ng Communist Party.
Partidong wala na.
Ha?
Partidong wala na.
Yung pawala na. Meron namang katiteng, pero wala nang Central Committee na buhay. Quite a number of them were already frightened by their experience, no? The experience of defeat and the experience of being afraid of the enemy. They did not know what theory, what line, what principles were applicable in the Philippines. But you have the wide physical and social terrain for building a people's army in the countryside. I was assigned in 1965 to write the political report, which required that I would talk about the factors and reasons why the Communist Party had so dwindled, and had suffered defeats without being able to rise up. The reaction of those in the Executive Committee was that Francisco Laba Jr. would say, "Oh, that is only a memorandum. I will write another draft." He never did. My draft of the political report signaled to the Labas that there was already a challenge to their traditional leadership. Sayang ba na pumasok pa ko dyan? Hindi. Dahil sa pag-member ko ng lumang partido, naugnayan ko yung ibang party members. If I came out of the blue direct from the student movement or I would have never come to know and be trusted by these people. If you can survive an error and you can correct it, you come out better. The new movement and the re-established party has also to benefit from the previous work and struggles of the people. Diba? We must link up with the good product of the old revolutionary movement. That's how we got the better part of the People's Army, sila Buscay, yung nasa Tarlac. And then yung masa niyan, malaki. How do we get 80,000 if you don't honor the previous struggles? It's not true that we were all students. By that time, we had already comrades in the worker and peasant movement. After the drafting of rectify errors and rebuild the party, we set up the Provisional Political Bureau to prepare for the reestablishment of the party. There were intensive studies from 1966 onwards.
There's a need for a communist party.
The need to re-establish the Communist Party of the Philippines arose from the break within the old Communist Party. The Lava group, or the Lava relatives and their followers, were already exposing themselves as revisionists in thinking. They think in terms of building the movement legally until such time that it would become possible to make an uprising, no? That means to say they were completely ignorant of how to lay the ground for people's war at any time because of the chronic crisis of the semi-colonial and semi-feudal system. You know, if you try to seize power in the cities right away, of course, that will not do. Huh? But you have the wide physical and social terrain for building a people's army in the countryside. I went underground 100% by November 1968. November was my first contact with Dante Boscaino, and we agreed to form the New People's Army. Because, you know, the old People's Army units headed by Boscaino were already there, no? That saved a lot of effort for the new party because you have ready-made experience and people who know how to move and how to develop as a people's army, how to deal with the people. That's the most important thing. So we had politico-military training with young people, students and workers from Manila. That was the time that I started teaching these people who did not use arms before how to shoot. No? Because, well, modesty aside, I'm a marksman. No? It's easy, no? If you are trying to hit a fixed target, you just synchronize 3 points. No? And then, of course, it becomes complicated when against a moving target, you have to estimate the windage and so on. Most of it is actually political training, but concentrated on how the People's Army conduct itself. Of course, what's the general line? How are the three weapons related to each other? Politics is in command of the gun. No? In other words, you don't do anything military that cannot be justified politically to serve the people. No? And then, of course, the People's Army is under the absolute leadership and command of the party. It is the enforcer of the people's democratic government. The new People's Army takes responsibility for organizing the provisional organ of political power and the mass organizations. But it must be able to pass on the task to the people themselves and the cadres, the work that has to be done continuously, and then they move on to a new area.
So Santa Rita became a solid base?
Yes.
How did that happen?
So it's a well-tested and trustworthy place, and Boscaino happens to be a native of that place. It's, you might say, 100% solid. For the revolution, before World War II, during the anti-Japanese fight, and then after the war. Most of Central Luzon is plains, no? Flat, no? And many big military camps of the enemy were around, no? But we say the people are our forest. You know, the forest has some kind of a protection from the enemy. We had a mass base of 80,000, much bigger than we had in Manila. That's the result of the work of the good part of the old People's Army. You know, they could make a demonstration easily of 50,000. Early on, we were able to bring tens of thousands of peasants to Manila from Tarlac. The grain contribution of the masses was big, no? So it was a resource base for the expansion of the movement. But then, in my short speech to the founding of the NPA, I said, we have resources here, and we have a reliable mass base, but we have vulnerabilities because this is flat ground and many military camps, despite the advantages of the people's revolutionary experience. But I said, we must move on. We must be able to move on a better area. So we were well prepared to go to Northeast Luzon, no? To Cagayan Valley. At the beginning, we had some 9 rifles. If you use 9 automatic rifles as a point of reference, we grew a lot. We were able to have 200 automatic rifles, mostly M16, by the end of 1970, excluding the Browning automatic rifles, which we got from the raid from the Philippine Military Academy. With regard to expansion, no, yung ilang sinanay sa Tarlac, konti lang yun. But then, some elements there came from Southern Luzon and the Visayas, I think Negros, no. Pero when we were in Isabela, we would train hundreds. That was the first quarter storm of the 1970, so Manila was sending cadres, and then these people came also from other islands. At one time, we had as many as 300. Ganun kalaki. So there would be several instructors working at the same time. You know, we even trained more than 10 Bangsamoro people. There were also local people, no? And then, by 1972, we would dispatch systematically those who took political military training and actual mass work in Isabela. We would send them to the provinces where they came from or where their families originated. Using this method of training from Isabela alone, we were able to reach already most of the regions, at least 10 regions before 1974. So may say, 2 years time lang. When martial law was declared, there were already units in certain regions to receive new trainees. So decentralized na. Meron ng Central Luzon, Southern Tagalog, meron niyang sa Panay, Negros, and Eastern Visayas, Samar. And then, yung mga early dispatches of personnel, akala mo walang nangyayari dahil tahimik. O yung pala they were doing well their mass work, they did the alliance work with the anti-Marcos political leaders, and they had arms, So, exactly, pag nag-report yung military, may nakatoras na silang NPA. That's good, they're alive, they're fighting. So, unwittingly, the enemy reported to us that the cadres previously sent had done their work well and were fighting,
We thank Joma for educating us about the beginnings of the refounding of the Communist Party on the right path and the Philippine Revolutionary Movement, setting it on the right path as well. We know that from that time of the founding to the present, many twists and turns, many developments in the movement, as well as in Ka Joma's life. To just give a little bit of background to those of us who are joining who may be a little bit less familiar with Joma's history, I just want to say a few words about his biography. So from the time he became the founding chairperson of the CPP in 1968 until he was captured by the Marcos military in 1977. He was always engaged in the theoretical and practical work of building the revolutionary movement. When he was detained in 1977, he was imprisoned illegally by the fascist regime for more than 8 years until the People's Movement was able to take it down in 1986. And he was released on March 5th, 1986 by the Cory Aquino regime. Even though he had been subjected to so many violations of human and constitutional rights, such as severe physical and psychological torture, the use of military commissions against civilians, and multiple charges, trumped up charges, he always fought against those. The Marcos fascist regime failed to convict him because he had filed a series of habeas corpus petitions to the Supreme Court, which countered the invalid judicial authority of the two Marcos military commissions. After his release, he was able to return to life outside, and his different papers were restored to him, and he could start to participate in the external work of the revolution, being able to attend seminars of prominent Southeast Asian and Filipino political leaders in Singapore and other places. He was able to rejoin the research and teaching faculty at the University of the Philippines, where, if you have tuned into some of our other tributes, so many of his past colleagues and students also gave praise to Ka Joma. He won many literary awards, including the Southeast Asian Right Award, the highest literary award in the region, for his socially concerned poetry and essays, which you'll hear a little bit from today. And then most especially for his book of poetry, Prison and Beyond, which reflects his torture and his struggle for freedom. Now, the other, some of the other things that happened after the fall of the regime included, during Ka Joma's international speaking tours under, the Corazon Aquino regime, he continued to always fight against the continuing injustices and problems in the Philippines. He never stopped his critique of the unjust ruling system and the Aquino regime's pro-imperialist and reactionary policies. Because of this, while he was abroad speaking, his Philippine passport was canceled and charges were renewed against him. And he was compelled to apply for political asylum in the Netherlands and forced into exile. Continued vilification happened of Ka Joma, as we are all very much aware. Every regime from Marcos up to even the current Marcos regime vilified Ka Joma. But he always fought against these charges and fought against the unjust tagging of him, and won even the cases against him, which were brought to courts in the Netherlands and the European Court of Justice, when the treacherous lobby of the US, Dutch, and European commissions tried to designate Joma, the CPP, and the NPA as terrorists in 2002, and fabricated charges against him in 2007. All of these charges never had any validity, and Ka Joma was able to fight them, serving as an example for all others to follow who would be similarly tagged by the regime. While in exile, he never stopped advocating for the struggle of the Filipino people for national and social liberation, and he diligently, arduously, and ceaselessly supported the anti-imperialist and democratic struggle of people of the world. In this regard, he participated in many international academic, social, and political organizations, seminars, and conferences, and most recently has become known as also the founding chairperson of the International League of People's Struggle in 2001. We will also hear from speakers of the ILPS later in the program. Joma was also, much more than, just a patriot to the Filipino people. As we talk about the International League of People's struggle, his contributions to the worldwide anti-imperialist movement are so bright and almost endless, which we'll hear from many tribute speakers today speaking on this. At this time, I'd like to call on our first tribute speaker, Bernadette Ellerin, who is the spokesperson for Bayan USA, to say a few words about Ka Joma from the first overseas chapter of the multi-sectoral alliance Bayan, and also someone who was able to get to know Ka Joma over the years. Berna.
Thank you. Magandang hapon, araw sa ating lahat wherever you are in the world. Bayan USA raises a red salute and pays tribute to the life and revolutionary contributions of Comrade Jose Maria Sison, great international proletarian revolutionary, Filipino communist, and patriot. As a young Marxist intellectual born of a landlord family, Joma ultimately turned against his class origin and became a class traitor in order to serve the most oppressed and exploited not only in Philippine society, but around the world. As a youth leader with the old party, the Partidong Komunista ng Pilipinas, or PKP, Joma studied diligently the global situation and the international communist movement, especially the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution in China under Mao Zedong, which inspired many national liberation and social movements of poor countries and colonies at that time. And in forming and mobilizing the Kabatang Makabayan, or Patriotic Youth, or KM, in the Philippines, critiqued and challenged the old PKP mode of thinking and tactics as not only detached from grasping the concrete conditions on the ground for the majority of Filipinos who come from the peasant class and live in the countryside, but promoted the need to uphold a solid line against modern revisionism, or the internal campaign to restore capitalism in countries where communist or socialist parties are in political power. This debate on modern revisionism between revisionist Soviet Union under Khrushchev and revolutionary China under Mao inspired Joma and many other young comrades of that time to push for what is now known as the First Great Rectification Movement, which manifested in the 1968 reestablishment of the Communist Party of the Philippines along the ideological line of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and against modern revisionism. In our 18 years of existence, many of us in Bayan USA are Filipino-American youth, born and raised here in the United States, where the largest concentration of Filipino migrants are. We draw strong foundational inspiration from the experiences and lessons of the Kabatang Makabayan and rectification movement, spearheaded by the contributions of Ka Joma, which set the framework for a steady movement to integrate with the basic masses and analyze the concrete conditions of Philippine society more seriously, and with a clear class bias towards raising proletarian leadership in the struggle for national democracy with a socialist perspective. This same movement not only reestablished the party, but developed strategy and tactics in armed struggle based on building the strength in the countryside where over 75% of Filipinos live through protracted People's War, the main content of which is waging anti-feudal campaigns via agrarian revolution. In other words, supporting democratic and the popular demand for land for the landless majority, food for the tillers, ancestral domain for the indigenous peoples, and down with the rotten, corrupt, and fascist rule of the landlord dynasties that control the Philippine political system and rule with death squads in the countryside. As the first overseas chapter of Bagong Alyansang Makabayan, or New Patriotic Alliance, the main political center for the Philippine National Democratic Movement, Filipino ND activists in the US under Bayan USA have the framework that our massive outmigration to rich monopoly capitalist countries like the US are the result of the basic root problems of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism that keep the Philippine economy and society in perpetual crisis, the crisis of a semi-colonial and semi-feudal country struggling to break free. And because massive outmigration is a byproduct of this crisis, overseas Filipinos or Filipino migrants are not only integral to the movement for national liberation, but have very important tasks to arouse, organize, and mobilize the broadest ranks of fellow Filipino migrants and solidarity allies to support the cause of national liberation of the Philippines and the worldwide struggle of the peoples of the world against imperialism. It is this orientation of the role of overseas Filipinos that comes from what we know now as the second Great Rectification movement in the Philippines, which in itself was another ideological movement in the party to rectify its errors and reaffirm its basic foundational principles. The Philippine Party admittedly suffered from extreme disorientation in the 1980s and into the early 1990s that necessitated the push for the collective humility and maturity to self-reflect, admit to weaknesses, apologize, and rebuild relations with the basic masses, and strengthen itself through diligent study in the practice of basic mass integration and class struggle. As Filipino ND activists in the US, we are taking cue from this rectification movement, a movement largely inspired by Joma's leadership. And if you were lucky enough to know him, Ka Joma, who lived a great part of his life in exile, and no, not self-imposed exile, as the Philippine government claims. This exile was necessary because up until the end, Joma had a bounty on his head. And you would know that the older Joma, despite his age, his health, and the endless state attacks and attempts on his life, even abroad, remained optimistic and humorous until the very end. When I had the opportunity to interview him back in 2011, I asked Joma what he would want to talk about if given the chance to do a speaking tour in the US. The first thing he said was peace and what it necessitates, the just and lasting peace the poor peoples of the world are fighting for versus the peace of the graveyard promoted by the reactionary ruling system. And in that same clip, Joma also confessed his shame for not having seen a Manny Pacquiao fight yet, and that it was his patriotic duty to support Pacquiao. So we agreed to end the interview right then and there so we could go to YouTube, watch a Pacquiao fight in his apartment. In addition to being a great thinker and intellectual on people's liberation, Joma was still very much a product of Philippine semi-feudal, semi-colonial society and very much a proponent of corny Filipino lolo or grandpa humor, which was very evident in my interviews with him. He was not perfect. He was human and flawed, but he was also personable and deviously funny. He could not carry a song tune to save his life, but he sang karaoke songs, especially revolutionary songs, with gusto and passion. He saw the importance of promoting revolution and inspiring the people through cultural work always. And in these very real modern times of escalating fascism and state repression, especially with the shameless return of the Marcos family to Malacanang, in an unholy alliance with the Dutertes, the Arroyos, and the Estradas, who literally stole the 2022 general elections and are now unleashing counterinsurgency against overseas Filipinos to the NTF-LCAC. We draw inspiration and strength to advance the cause of national democracy with a socialist perspective from Joma, who for many years while in prison under Marcos Sr. was tortured, and whom for the rest of his life was vilified and red tagged by the Philippine government, who continue to think that they can make the ND movement fall by going after its leaders. But they are mistaken. Even in his final days, from the hospital, Joma wanted nothing more but to offer his life in service to the people and work tirelessly with his comrade and wife, Julie de Lima, to put into words the just basis and invincibility of the People's Democratic Revolution in the Philippines. In his final article, Joma wrote, "The Filipino People's Democratic Revolution is invincible because it is just and necessary to fight for and achieve national liberation and democracy against three evil forces of foreign monopoly capitalism, domestic feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism in a rapidly rotting semi-colonial and semi-feudal society. Every reactionary regime has boasted of being able to destroy the armed revolution within the current term of whoever is the president. But the semi-colonial and semi-feudal character of the ruling system and its ever-worsening chronic crisis puts limits on its abilities to control the population and suppress the people's resistance. At any given time, the NPA and other revolutionary forces can work freely and launch tactical offensives in more than 80% of the Philippine archipelago. It is the toiling masses and the rest of the people who fight for national liberation, democracy, and socialism against imperialism and all reaction who let us hope for a bright future of world peace and promote prosperity. They are now waging anti-imperialist and democratic mass struggle against the current global crisis that has been brought about by the revisionist betrayal of socialism, neoliberalism, and fascism. These are the prelude to the resurgence of the world proletarian socialist revolution. We salute you, Kasamang Joma. Thank you for promoting and guiding the struggles of everyday Davids against the brutal and fascist Goliaths in the Philippines and around the world. Thank you for teaching us to think and practice as everyday revolutionaries. Thank you for promoting humility, self-reflection, and rectification, especially in leadership. Thank you for dedicating your entire adult life, even while being tortured in prison and under the most repressive conditions in exile, to uniting not just the Filipino people, but the peoples of the world, especially the international proletariat, to resist and fight our common enemy and build collective strength through class struggle, not just as a concept, but as a living practice. We will honor you and keep you alive by continuing what you started. Mabuhay ang diwa ni Jose Maria Sison, ibagsak ang rehimeng Marcos Duterte, ibagsak ang pasismo ng Estado. Mabuhay ang sambayanang Pilipino lumalaban. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much. Ka Joma Lives.
Thank you so much, Berna. Ka Joma Lives. Thank you very much for your words. There were so many people that Joma has inspired over the years. And next up, I'd like to call on one of our cultural workers who has been inspired by Joma's legacy and by Joma's cultural offerings. At this time, I'd like to invite Jomari, who's an organizer with Anak Bayan Daily City, so with our youth. As a cultural worker, Jomari hopes to use their poetry to uplift and advance the national democratic mass movement. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Jomari, who will be sharing a poem today.
Thank you, Rhonda. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Jomari. I'm with Anak Bayan Daily City. I wrote this poem in honor of Ka Joma, and I'll try to let the poem speak mostly for itself, but I will say there's quite a few references to his different poems and essays in recognition of the breadth and depth of his work, and that when we continue to struggle for liberation, we carry all of it with us. And so the poem is titled, "And the Poet Must Be Like a Gorilla." 1. The urgent task beckons to be carried out, yet for a moment, even Sierra Madre trembles. Her leaves rustle, her twigs break, the sound of morning to signal dusk. Smell the fire that whimpers in the cold. Tonight it bites at bone, persistent, reminder of life in a grieving dark. Grief, the endurance of a love still demanding, the inner silence of outer absence, sat beside the prone gorilla, alert and unabandoned by duty, as ocean calm as before the storm, still to ensnare a relentless enemy, a single collective breath, a heavy weight. 2. Despite a tomorrow that confirms all joy and fear, despite what want, what ideal, inevitable and material, a tomorrow, as certain as death, as fungus grows and reaction cowers, as certain as nightfall to cloak loved ones in that somber blue, that heavy weight, and still yet asking to face the tender contradiction that a sliver of moonlight cracks a blackened sky, and that too is certain, as absence only as great as its counterpart. Despite grief, there is tomorrow, as certain as morning makes tomorrow, as certain as seed buried sprouts undeterred, as tenacious spring means victory ensured, as elder ascends into ancestor unafraid, and as poet dares to hope despite, forging from rusty prison bars to place it upon the broadening masses. 3. Poem and Kasama. As subject and mirror who fight with you within you, honing mind, what stone to weapon, blade sings that natured rhythm, to belittle one's suffering and give way to collective, to be taken for granted and become commonplace, to pluck the heart yearn mango that reminds one is born of many, belonging to a bed of soil, yours as well as ours, but for traitor comprador a fruitless grave, while revolutionary is planted by loving hands. Shining gold drawn from darkest depths, precious pearl produced by struggle, because a poem relieves the prisoner mind, because poem resolves the guerrilla spirit. Dare to carry on, you poet. Smell the fire weeping to warm a red fighter and offer more tinder to enliven its embers. Eager torchbearers steel your calloused hands and grasp firmly your birthright of action. Make ashes of departure to clear path for homecoming, ashes of return, that beloved warrior. Be hero birthed by ceaseless service, who dies as all do, but lives to be martyr. 4. The poet must be like a guerrilla, whose words pulse warm red heart to raised fist, and flesh is the face who calls out for freedom, whose hopeful vigor manifests material, exceeding worldly understanding to change it to. The poet must be like a guerrilla, strategic propagandist and friend to all peasants, whose verse is voice of the working class, burning echo of ancestors' cry and marching with massa that decisive force. The poet must be like a guerrilla, sharpened weapon of dauntless spirit, wielding pen and sword that strike the same, a fighting force, a ceaseless flow, fresh new blood for the protracted theme. You poet proletarian, you hand of the people, you heartbeat hope of our treasured nation, make music the endless movement of strength, make final refrain our fated liberation. Thank you so much. Ka Joma Lives, and mabuhay Ka Joma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jomari, for that poem and for sharing with us your inspiration, your cultural inspiration that Joma gave to you. So Ka Joma, in the founding of the Party of the Proletariat, planted the seeds for the carrying on of that movement, even beyond the shores of the Philippines. In the fire that's carried by Filipinos overseas, in diaspora, wherever we are, we have learned to grow where we are planted, inspired by the knowledge of what must be done to truly free our homeland. For our next speaker, I'd like to invite Freddie Guerrero, who is with the Migrant USA. Freddie is a member of the National Executive Committee of Migrant USA, which is an alliance of Filipino migrants organizations in the US, fighting for the rights and welfare of overseas Filipino workers and for genuine democracy in the Philippines. Freddie?
Salamat, Rhonda. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here today to share a tribute to Ka Joma. Migrante USA pays its deepest respect for Professor Jose Maria Sison. As a Filipino migrant, I never understood the reasons for moving away from the Philippines, and it wasn't until I read Joma's book, Philippine Society and Revolution, that opened my eyes and gave so much clarity to the reason why my family was forced to leave the Philippines: the corruption, the poverty, and lack of jobs. This is not a unique story. The different challenges the Filipino masses are facing is due to the three basic problems of Philippine society: US imperialism, bureaucrat capitalism, and feudalism. The lessons I learned from Joma in the PSR are in fact very common and gave words to the realities of millions of Filipino migrants across the world. Ka Joma lived his life for the basic masses. While he grew up rich in the same hometown as my grandfather in the Ilocos Sur province, his consciousness was raised being with the peasants and workers in his youth. Even when he formed Kabataan Makabayan in his late 20s, he made the point to ensure the youth movement also linked itself to the workers' struggles. And he himself integrated with workers, raising the consciousness of workers to not just fight for their basic economic needs, but for the total liberation of the working class and all of Philippine society. In Joma's solidarity message to the launching of Migrante International's education movement called Padepa Migrante, Joma shares, it is of urgent necessity that Migrante International consolidate and expand its ranks in order to cope with the growing economic, social, and political problems and meet the challenges for defending the rights and interests of the migrant workers and their families and aiming for a bright future for them and the entire people through their own struggle. With this quote, I am constantly reminded that Migrante USA and other Migrante organizations across the world has a lot of work to agitate, organize, and mobilize overseas Filipino workers, both on land and sea, to understand the roots of their struggles and empower them to take part in changing and improving their conditions. Ka Joma's contribution will forever be with the proletariat and passed on to future generations of workers beyond us. Migrante USA vows to continue the struggle for national democracy with a socialist perspective. We vow to continue the fight for a future where our kababayan can be at home with their loved ones, not forced to migrate, and where their hearts will not ever have to yearn for mangoes. Mabuhay ang pambansang demokratikong kilusan, mabuhay ang manggagawang Pilipino, mabuhay si Ka Joma, Ka Joma Lives. Maraming salamat.
Ka Joma Lives. Thank you so much, Freddie, for your words, and to Migrante USA, all that you do. Ka Joma also inspired peoples of the world and the proletariat of the world. We'd like to invite now a solidarity statement by the International Migrants Alliance. The International Migrants Alliance is a broad anti-imperialist alliance that defends and promotes the rights and well-being of all migrant, immigrant, and refugee workers. It was the first international alliance led by grassroots migrant workers, refugees, and displaced people themselves, not advocates speaking for them. We'd like to play this tribute statement by the current chair of International Migrants Alliance, Annie Listari.
Greeting of solidarity. On behalf of International Migrants Alliance, we express our deepest condolence to the family, friends, colleagues, and comrades of Professor Jose Maria Sison. While the progressive movement of migrants, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and displaced people is saddened by the loss of one of our own, a fellow displaced, we also offer our salute to the Professor Sison or Ka Joma as a long-time activist, genuine internationalist, and a true revolutionary. For us in IMA, Ka Joma shared their sharpest line and analysis on imperialism and migration. During the couple of time, he was one of our keynote speakers in several global assembly of IMA, and IMA sponsored webinars and fora during the past years. He was always ready to accept invitations from us to share his thought on imperialist crisis commodification of migrants, and the role of migrants in national liberation and democratic movement in our homelands. His critical analysis on the current development of global capitalism helped us, the leaders and advocates of migrant and refugee in IMA, to strategize our campaign and organizing. He challenged us to think deeper and broader, beyond our sector, beyond our nationality, beyond our current territories, as we are part of the world proletariat. We shall ever be grateful to Ka Joma. On a more personal note, I got to know Ka Joma through the work of International League of People Struggle, or ILPS, Commission on Migrants and Refugees when he was still the chair of the League. The commission was also instrumental in the formation of IMA. I met him several times during ILPS international assemblies and other informal visits. Through these meetings, I learned many facts about him. First, he was a refugee who was forced to leave his homeland in the Philippines because of his involvement with the National Democratic Movement. Later, I learned that there are over 60 million asylum seekers and refugees as a consequences of war and political conflict that serve imperialist interests. Those in the front line, like Ka Joma, are confronted with the most intense political persecution. Second, he loved jokes and karaoke. He even had his own karaoke magic mic. This, for me, is a very rare hobby for someone of his caliber and someone who is also one of the most wanted persons by the government. Third, what made me admire him most was that despite his in-depth knowledge and experience, he did not put himself as seniors of others. He did not preach or treat others like his juniors. He was very passionate about learning and listening. He only engaged in serious discussion or expressed his opinion only if someone asked him. Fourth, he also made people around him comfortable, women or men, adult or children, even when someone did not speak English well. I really wonder why a humble and a dedicated man like him had been tagged as a terrorist and target for arrest. Like many of us, he just wanted to fight for genuine peace, democracy, and sovereignty of his country. For me and many of us, he was a friend, a comrade, a teacher, and inspiration. He truly is a hero of Filipino people's struggle for national democracy and socialism. He is a true internationalist for all struggling people of the world. His legacy will live on. Rest in power, Ka Joma. Long live Ka Joma, long live international solidarity.
Thank you so much, Annie, from the International Migrants Alliance. Indeed, Ka Joma lives, and long live international solidarity. We wanted to thank again everyone who's tuned in to this remembrance for Ka Joma. We want to keep encouraging you all to please any messages of solidarity, any personal tributes that you want to make, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, and they'll be shared out via our moderator with the audience. There was one question that came through asking how many people are currently in attendance. There are over 120 viewers on, with however many more people watching from each of those viewing spots. So please share out this webinar. It's currently being recorded, so you can share it out later. And I believe it's also being live streamed. As our program has shown so far, Ka Joma was not only a paragon of wisdom and experience for the Philippine revolutionary movement, but for revolutionary movements and movements for national liberation all over the world. He gave so many messages in his role as the chairperson of the International League of People's Struggle, and any other platform that he used, and continued to do so, in his last few years as the chairperson emeritus of the League as well. While he was chairperson, he gave many messages to ILPS conferences around the world, and even other conferences that ILPS supported. As we know, US monopoly capitalism is a brutal monster that affects people from all over the world. That even includes oppressed and exploited people within the US here itself. Joma's gave a lot of wisdom about how we can understand how the problems that we face are due to similar enemies, and therefore our movements should be linked arm in arm. So we're now going to listen to a short video statement that Joma gave when he was chair of the ILPS as a message with the National Conference to Defeat Austerity that took place in Detroit, Michigan in the USA. So we'll hear that now.
Imperialism is not just about war and invading and bombing countries, as the U.S. military machine has done in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Somalia, Vietnam, Korea, and so many other countries around the world. It is not just about the CIA overthrowing democratic governments, as it has done in so many countries and is now trying to do in Venezuela. Imperialism is monopoly capitalism. It is the rule of finance capital, the rule of the banks and the bankers. It is their drive for profits and more profits and super profits, the need for ever greater return on their invested capital that drives the United States from war to war, to lay waste to country after country, to impose brutal dictatorships around the world. The same drive for profit has driven these same imperialist banks to wage economic war against the people of Detroit, Baltimore, Cleveland, and Newark, and many other once booming industrial centers in the United States, now impoverished. They have foreclosed on homes and destroyed communities. They have destroyed schools and hospitals and mass transit and libraries to squeeze money for debt payments and maintain the value of their loans. In Detroit, they have imposed direct bankers' rule, and on top of that, they loot the public treasury to feed the Pentagon and pay for the bankers' wars. Nowhere is the cruelty of the bankers and their system revealed more clearly than in the colonized nation of Puerto Rico. 6 months after the devastation of Hurricane Maria, thousands have died needlessly and hundreds of thousands remain without power. But the bankers demand their pound of flesh on the island's $70 billion odious debt and salivate on the profits to be made by gentrifying the island. The workers of Puerto Rico have given too much to the bankers. Puerto Rico does not need its debt restructured. It needs to be canceled. Puerto Rico needs reparations from the United States, and the Puerto Rican people have the right to determine their own destiny free from the bankers' government in Washington. The same is true of Detroit and all the other U.S. cities bound by debt payment. When the people of the Philippines resist the Duterte dictatorship, they are also fighting the Wall Street bankers who stand behind it. When the people of Venezuela and all of Latin America resist the United States, it is the rule of the bankers they are resisting.
When the people of Southern Africa fight the legacy of apartheid, they are fighting the Wall Street banks. When the people of Palestine and Syria and Iraq and Iran resist the tracks of the US and Israel, they are fighting the bankers and the oil companies they control. The people of Korea are also resisting slavery, the Wall Street banks. The fact that the economic crisis pushes the imperialist ruling class of this to our war makes solidarity between our struggles more important than ever. We wish you success in planning fight back strategy for the people's struggle in Detroit and across the United States. Your fight is our fight. Together we can defeat the banks and build a society for people, not profit, for workers, not bankers. Long live international solidarity. Workers and oppressed peoples of all countries, unite.
Indeed, workers and oppressed of all countries unite, a message that Joma always gave us when we took to the streets or anywhere to fight mass struggles against, as he said it, Wall Street, the oil companies, any of the agents of US imperialism. Now to speak on Joma's significance to building the global anti-imperialist and the struggle and the founding of ILPS, I'm proud to introduce my fellow ILPS US steering committee member, Bill Dorries. The floor is yours.
The German revolutionary poet Bertolt Brecht wrote, "There are comrades who fight a day and they are good. Others fight a year and they are better. There are those who fight many years and are very good. But there are those who fight their whole lives, and those are the indispensable ones." I would like to add to that. There are comrades who, by word and deed, organize and inspire tens and hundreds of thousands, millions even, to fight for their entire lives. People like Vladimir Lenin, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh, Kim Il-sung, Fidel Castro, Cecilia Sanchez, Amilcar Cabral, Che Guevara. Comrades like Jose Maria Sison, who millions call Ka Joma. In his youth, Ka Joma not only saw the need to join the people's movement to fight for the workers and oppressed, as others have covered, he analyzed the material and political conditions in the Philippines and organized the patriotic youth. And at 29, he refounded the Communist Party of the Philippines on a revolutionary basis, and in its wake, the New People's Party and National Democratic Front. I'd like to mention he did that only 3 years after the horrible defeat and massacre of the workers and peasants in neighboring Indonesia after a CIA coup, and he drew the lessons of that. The new revolutionary party and movement spread like wildfire due to Joma's revolutionary strategy and perspective of digging deep and sinking roots among the workers and peasants, the most oppressed. The party and army became loved by the poor who knew it was their party, their army. It became hated and feared, not only by the exploiting classes in the Philippines, but by their masters in Washington on Wall Street. When he was forced into exile after 9 years of torture in the dungeons of the first Marcos dictatorship, far from his beloved homeland, unable to return, he continued to fight. He wrote furiously to educate new generations of revolutionaries, and in 2001, the year U.S. imperialism launched its so-called war on terror, he founded the International League of People's Struggle, based on the understanding that the workers and oppressed people the world around have a common cause and a common enemy. At a time when the global revolutionary tide of the late 20th century was in retreat and there were many betrayals, Joma and his comrades never wavered. They held high the red flag of the workers and oppressed, of international solidarity and revolution. The League's 6th Assembly in 2019 in Hong Kong drew 400 delegates from 400 organizations in 43 countries. They were workers on sugar cane plantations and in textile mills, domestic workers and dock workers, indigenous people, peasants and urban poor, fighters for women's and LGBTQ rights, healthcare workers, students, environmental activists, and others, united by the theme, win a bright socialist future for humanity, unite the people to fight against imperialist plunder, war, racism, and fascism. It was my honor and joy to work with and learn from Ka Joma for 11 years on the International Coordinating Committee of ILPS, and from the other wonderful comrades of the NDF in exile in the Netherlands who had done so much and suffered so much. I was able to experience his love for the people and his infectious revolutionary optimism, which was really the secret of his effectiveness as a revolutionary leader. The ruling class teaches us the great man theory of history, that history is supposedly a parade of great individuals, and that the people are but objects of history. What distinguishes revolutionary leaders is that they know that the masses, the people, are the subjects of history, the masters of our fate. The people, the workers and oppressed, are what it's all about. When I think of Ka Joma, his humble personality, his sense of humor, his love of culture and song and poetry and dance, his joy in engaging with people and talking with everyone, especially the young, it really all reflected his deep love and faith in the masses. And people could feel that. Along with his faith in the workers and oppressed, Joma's revolutionary optimism was fueled by a deep understanding of history, of economics, of the crisis of capitalism. In his writings and analysis, he starts with the objective, always, the big picture, the material analysis of the world situation, as he did in the Philippines 50 years ago. He gave constant thought to the biggest and seemingly smallest problems, both political and practical. In the last analysis, what makes a revolutionary leader great is whom they organize and educate, what they leave behind. Friedrich Engels, at the graveside of Karl Marx in 1883, said, "The world's greatest thinker has ceased to think." In the Soviet Union, they said, "Lenin lives, Lenin lived, Lenin will always live." Just as those revolutionary thinkers and fighters live today in their vision and in the global revolutionary struggle, Ka Joma will always live. We will sorely miss his beautiful presence, his wisdom, his counsel and company. But he lives in the hearts and minds of millions in the Philippines and around the globe. He lives in the dedicated and heroic cadre of the CPP. He lives among workers fighting for their rights, peasants and indigenous people fighting for their land, the urban poor fighting for their homes, youth and students fighting for the future of our planet, and the heroic red fighters who have taken up the gun in the People's Democratic Revolution that continues in cities and countryside. He lives in the hundreds of mass organizations in every continent he guided in the International League of People's Struggle. He will live forever in an independent, socialist Philippines, in a free and socialist world. He lives in all of us here today. Long live the spirit and legacy of Ka Jose Maria Sison. Long live the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines. Long live international solidarity. Workers and oppressed people of all countries unite.
Thank you so much, Bill. Indeed, Ka Joma lives and will always live through our acts and deeds to fight, to unite, and win that better world, that socialist future for humanity. We're now going to play a song written by Joy Barrios for Joma on the celebration of his 80th birthday. Joma himself was able to see it when he was alive, and it continues to celebrate his life now. So now let us listen to this song, Pulang Saludo.
kasama. Bayani ng iyong panahon at pugay sa pagsisimula, mitsan ang ating pagbangon.
Panulat at tula mo'y sandata, may talim ang bawat kataga.
Tangan namin ang bawat aral at talinghaga sa pagkasinta. Pulang saludo kasama sa dakila mong layo. Pulang saludo sa paglabayani ka ng iyong panahon. Kahit saan kasama ay kasama, bawat larangan, larangan ng digma. Ating paglabang matuwid ngayon'y sinusulong sa buong daigdig. Pulang saludo kasama, pamanamoy tatag at tapang. Pulang saludo Ka Joma, bayani ka ng iyong bayan. Sa pakikibaka, kakapit-bisig, katuwang sa bawat labanan. Laging may alap sa ating dibdib, laging tanaw ang tagumpay. Pulang saludo kasama, pamanamoy tatag at tapang. Pulang saludo Ka Joma, bayani ka ng iyong bayan. Sa pakikibaka, kakapit-bisig, katuwang sa bawat labanan. Laging may alap sa ating dibdib, laging tanaw ang tagumpay. Pulang saludo, pulang saludo, pulang saludo sa'yo, Ka Joma.
Thank you to Joy Barrios. And pulang saludo, red salute, to Ka Joma and all the struggling masses of the world. Well, it's often been said of Ka Joma that he was a titan of international solidarity, as indeed he was. It's now my honor to introduce another titan of international solidarity who I've had the privilege of working with and learning from in a variety of spaces over the last few years. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Antonio Tuhan, Director of the Institute for Political Economy and the founder of the People's Research Institute, Ibon International. Antonio, or TJ, as he is sometimes known, was also the vice chairperson of ILPS while Joma was chair, and so worked tirelessly alongside Joma, but while both were being red tagged by reactionary governments every step of the way to organize and open up new spaces for revolutionary internationalism. So, to share more on the significance of Joma's contributions to international struggles, the floor is yours, TJ.
Thank you very much, Cody. For us, it is difficult to talk about Joma. He is still with us. And for us, Joma was not just the emeritus of ILPS as we talk, as we refer to him. He was actually an important leader in the world. His leadership spanned several decades. He is known as the most important living communist till his death last month. He is most known because of his integration of Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong thought into the conditions of the world today. In this situation of triumphalism of imperialism, but now the decay of imperialism. We were able to work with Joma when we were setting up ILPS. Before that, the US was on a rampage of US, triumphalism with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, so-called. Then the US apologists talk about the end of class struggle, supposedly the end of militant struggle for socialism. But Joma was not fazed. With his comrades in different parties around the world, even though there was a simmering debate on what has happened, Joma actually presented the beacon of hope of the correct analysis of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that the future is upon us. With that, he brought together several organizations and set up the ILPS. They started in 1977. They went through debates how to set it up, because ILPS is something new in the world. And not only was it new, it is a situation in the world where many communist parties were changing their analysis. You have a situation where there was a lot of attacks on radical movements. But in the end, even though there were a lot of debates, the important thing is to understand that we need to build a broad international united front. An international united front that brings together the workers' movements, the other semi-proletarians like the peasants, the other sectors of society, the other sections, and other classes, the progressive classes. Bring them together to fight imperialism. This in a situation where you have US triumphalism. Indeed, that was a time when you cannot even talk about the word imperialism. You can much less say socialism. But ILPS was set up at the turn of the decade, the century, and there ILPS has since grown to become the largest militant organization of mass movements around the world. Now, what is important for us is to understand that that Joma focused on the question of the cause of the proletariat and the masses. That we need to mobilize, arouse, and organize the people around the world to fight imperialism. This focus on organizing, and building militant struggles is important to go beyond the necessary debates, theoretical debates, but at the same time, we should already push forward because imperialism will not go away. We have to bring it down. So under the leadership of the working class and the institutions, ILPS became particularly strong Joma, we know, was a labor organizer. And not only that, he built the Communist Party of the Philippines. He actually helped build trade unions in the Philippines. And he also built up working class institutions like the one that is led by him now, the INPS. The working class leadership in ILPS is important because it ensures the strength of and the militance of the anti-imperialist struggle. On the other hand, it is important that the working class, the trade unions, the migrant organizations link with other sectors of society, the youth, the women, the church people, the institutions. These are important to bring together into a common front against imperialism. Joma is an hands-on chair. Hands-on. He is the only chair that has produced more than 200 statements per year. Unbelievable. He is indefatigable because he is always, every day, looking at the issues and addressing this to provide effective leadership, propaganda to arouse the masses. He is also hands-on in preparing meetings. He is hands-on in building the secretariat of ILPS. And not only that, he is a problem solver. Mean to say he doesn't delegate. He makes sure that things are done well. And that's why Joma is so effective as a leader. Joma is not just ILPS. We know that. He has provided comprehensive leadership to the People's War in the Philippines, to the democratic movement in the countryside, to the democratic movement on the urban areas, the broad united front in the Philippines, the election struggle, the peace talks, and also the diaspora. But Joma is not just Filipino. He is an internationalist, a Marxist, a communist, and he has made sure that international solidarity coming from the Philippine struggle will reverberate, not just to draw the lessons from the Philippines, but actually to contribute to help other movements around the world, to build parties, revolutionary parties of the working class, and also eventually to build the International League of People's Struggle. The International League of People's Struggle presents today a beacon of struggle, but at the same time, we have to use the ILPS to build revolutionary parties, working class parties that will lead the struggle in every country. Eventually, that is the motor that ILPS can also help. In the end, what Joma was working on is to build a broad anti-imperialist united front, not just with ILPS, but other formations around the world. This is a vision that we are trying to build with the ILPS as the fulcrum, as the pillar of the struggle to end imperialism. Joma is unbelievable. Joma ensures that we are able to present the path towards socialism. Joma lives.
Joma lives. Indeed, Joma was and is unbelievable and will always be guided by his practice. Thank you so much, TJ. And as TJ mentioned, Ka Joma was a great Filipino patriot, a steadfast revolutionary dedicated to the national and social liberation of the Philippines. But as we've been seeing this whole time, he also analyzed the global situation and inspired so many in their own struggles for national liberation and socialism. He studied the world situation as capitalism was restored in both the Soviet Union and China, and stayed firm and steadfast in the principles of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and against modern revisionism. His contributions to the global movement against imperialism went well beyond his work in ILPS to inspire revolutionary and progressive forces all across the world, in so many different countries. Speaking next will be folks from just a few of these many countless organizations that have taken inspiration and drawn lessons from Ka Joma's contributions. So the first in our brief solidarity messages will be from the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. So I'll pass it off to Joe Osbacher.
Thank you, Cody. What an honor to be asked to share our statement today. Our statement, which was written by our political secretary, Mick Kelly. Mick had a previous commitment which he could not get out of. He sends his regrets and expresses how much he misses Ka Joma. Mick and Joma were friends for almost 30 years. They first met in Brussels at the International Communist Seminar in 1994. Mick traveled many times to Utrecht, the last time in 2019, just before the epidemic. I want to share first for me the moment, the first great impact that Joma had in politics, which was in 1992. The revolutionary movement around the world was in crisis, as TJ was speaking about, with the collapse of the Soviet Union. We founded Freedom Road in 1985, but the crisis of socialism brought out right opportunists within Freedom Road who declared that the collapse of the Soviet Union meant that the era of Leninism was ending. I think it was in March of 1992 when a Kasama in Chicago brought a photocopy of Reaffirm Our Basic Principles and Carry the Revolution Forward. It came at just the right time and helped us rally proletarian revolutionaries around the pole of opinion that had been created by Ka Joma. Our organizations have worked together actually since 1987. Comrades from Freedom Road participated in delegations throughout the 90s and again starting in 2016. And many times we've joined campaigns in defense of the CPP, the NPA, the National Democratic Front, or forces in the National Democratic Movement. And when our organization was targeted by the FBI for repression in 2010, Ka Joma was one of the first voices in our defense. Our solidarity has grown and grown. When Freedom Road helped lead the march of 12,000 people against NATO here in Chicago in 2010, we made certain that Bayan, Anak Bayan, and the ILPS were prominent in that event. And when we helped refound the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, again, the National Democratic Movement of the Philippines was given an honored place and a prominent role. It was my great honor to be asked to speak at the People's SONA 2016, but it was even a greater honor when to be red tagged last year in Quezon City. But now I'll read the Freedom Road statement. To the Communist Party of the Philippines, from Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Mick Kelly, Political Secretary. Dear comrades, it is with great sorrow that we learned of the passing of Comrade Jose Maria Sison, The Freedom Road Socialist Organization extends our sincere condolences to Ka Joma's many friends, comrades, Ka Julieta de Lima, and his entire family. He will be missed wherever working and oppressed people are striving for their emancipation. We mourn the departure of a true titan in the world communist movement. As a founder of the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army, Comrade Sison made tremendous contributions to the People's Democratic Revolution in the Philippines and helped bring closer the day when the burdens of imperialism, semi-feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism are lifted off the backs of the Filipino people. Ka Joma was an outstanding proletarian revolutionary whose life and work stands as an example to communists everywhere. Enduring hardship and torture at the enemy's hands, he embodied what it means to serve the people. He indeed feared neither hardship nor death. Comrade Jose Maria Sison made numerous contributions to Marxism-Leninism, thus enriching the content of scientific socialism. A relentless opponent of revisionism and opportunism, Comrade Sison's thinking, his contributions to revolutionary theory have an application internationally and deserve study by all serious communists. Ka Joma was a true working class internationalist who took seriously the dictum, "Workers and oppressed peoples of the world unite." As the leader of the International League of People's Struggles, he spearheaded and was a practical builder of international solidarity. The people of the Philippines and the people of the US have a common enemy in the monopoly capitalist class that rules Wall Street and in its American empire. Comrade Sison stood on the front lines of those fighting to bring the empire down. The leadership and members of Freedom Road appreciate the keen interest Ka Joma took in the development of a revolutionary movement in the United States and the warm friendship that he extended to our organization. When the US government launched an attack on anti-war and international solidarity activists and attempted to imprison key leaders of Freedom Road, he was among the first to speak out against the repression. His efforts helped to forge an unbreakable bond between the revolutionary movement in the US and the revolutionary movement in the Philippines. We will miss him. Freedom Road Socialist Organization shares the grief of the Communist Party of the Philippines, and we extend our solidarity at this difficult moment. We are also committed to learning from the life and work of Comrade Sison. The contributions of Comrade Jose Marie Sison will live forever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Ka Joma Lives. And what a timely essay to reference as well. Reaffirm our basic principles. One of the many things Joma always taught us as revolutionaries is whenever there is confusion, whenever there is crisis, whenever there's disorientation, it is your basic principles that can always be the guiding way forward. So thank you for sharing Freedom Road Socialist Organization's remarks on that, Joe. Next, we will hear a statement from the Socialist Unity Party and Struggle La Lucha. So for that, I'll pass it off to John Parker.
Okay. I'm trying to take my video. Okay, there we go. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you, John.
Okay. You can hear me? So, we send our deepest solidarity and revolutionary love to Comrade Julie de Lima, to all of Professor Sison's family, companions, and loved ones, and to all the comrades of the Communist Party of the Philippines, the National Democratic Front, and to the New People's Army on the sad occasion of the passing of Jose Maria Sison, passing on as another one of history's beloved members. What a life. And it brings to mind a curious thought. If you examine the list of many people on the US terrorist list, and then examine the list of many who received the Nobel Peace Prize, it seems as if the lists were mistakenly exchanged. How could a person whose life was dedicated to social justice and liberation, fighting to stop endless imperialist wars on the people and the world, be on anyone's terrorist list? Well, because that list was meant to stop the work of people like Professor Jomo Sison, whose ideas and actions and examples to young people and all those aspiring for a better world not only inspire, but instruct. And although it is an honor to be such a thorn in the side of US imperialism and its puppet regimes, it carries a heavy burden. Most of us may never have to suffer the torture, the isolation, the physical and emotional discomforts suffered by Comrade Sison, and many of us would not be able to endure it. But Comrade Sison shows us that our working class contains many who can not only endure it, but use it to make them even more effective as revolutionaries. And that's a nightmare for the ruling class. Joma's endurance was so important. The rebirth of the Communist Party of the Philippines and the Philippine national liberation struggles was a mighty chapter in the revolutionary tide that swept the world in the mid-20th century. Later, that tide receded. There are many setbacks, compromises, and betrayals, but under Ka Joma's guidance and endurance, the comrades of the CPP, the NPA, and NDF held the red flag high. That hardship endured by Joma, however, undoubtedly inspired an intense hate of fascism, imperialism, and the effects both personal and generalized against the international working class. But he made that hate into useful energy for the struggle of the Filipino people, and as Frantz Fanon illustrated in analyzing the anti-colonial struggle in Algeria, he made the struggle of the Filipino people useful for every revolutionary movement against colonialism. With his scientific analysis of the productive forces and their relation to the special character of the working class in the Philippines, he developed winning strategies for liberation that applied to those working the land, those working the factories, or those forced to work in the bellies of the imperialist beasts overseas. We agree with the conclusions of the Second Congress of the Communist Party of the Philippines in characterizing Comrade Joma as a great communist thinker, leader, teacher, and guide of the Filipino proletariat and torchbearer of the international communist movement. And in understanding the necessity of building the unity of our entire working class and being in solidarity with the struggles of our entire working class internationally, like all great revolutionary thinkers and leaders, his work instructs all seeking to overthrow this capitalist system of oppression, war, exploitation, and poverty, and hasten the liberation of all of humanity with a socialist and communist future. Comrade Jose Masison, presente. Thank you for allowing us to participate.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you for that really important reminder. Joma was not a terrorist. Activism is not terrorism. And from Palestine to the Philippines to Puerto Rico, defend human rights defenders. Next speaker will be from the Palestinian Youth Movement. So I want to pass it on to Voulette, the General Coordinator of PYM in the Bay Area.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here and an honor to read the statement on behalf of the Palestinian Youth Movement. The Palestinian Youth Movement joins our Filipino comrades and revolutionaries around the world in paying tribute to the remarkable revolutionary leader, teacher, and poet, Jose Maria Sison. We send our deepest solidarity to Comrade Joma's loved ones, especially to his wife, Comrade Julia de Lima, who sat alongside him recording his final contributions to the movement until his last breath. We send our warmest revolutionary salute to our comrades of the Communist Party of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front. As Palestinian and Arab youth in diaspora, Ka Joma's experiences, spending the twilight years of his life in exile from his beloved homeland, is familiar to us. And our hearts ache for him. But even in his exile and the painful longing that comes with it, Ka Joma's perseverance and love for his people was vast enough to nourish internationalist struggles all over the world, including our own. We honor Ka Joma with the highest salute, for his ultimate sacrifice to the world revolution, as a martyr who will forever live on as the people's struggle for liberation persists. We are grateful to wage our struggle in an ecosystem of liberation movements, influenced in one way or another by the legacy and work of Joma. Struggling alongside our comrades in the national democratic movement has been invaluable and a true honor. Ka Joma's analysis of material conditions of the Filipino people and the masses of the world is as sharp as it was grounded in revolutionary principles. His writing was as beautiful and moving as it was powerful. The Palestinian youth movement continues to learn and reflect back lessons from our Filipino comrades' practice and ways in which Ka Joma embodied the principle of serving the people. We see in him a true revolutionary spirit who maintains resilience in the face of repression. He inspires us to do the same and continue our resistance against imperialism, Zionism, fascism, and oppression in all forms. From all of our chapters across the world, we honor Ka Joma and his contributions to our national liberation movement. Ka Joma's unwavering support for the liberation of Palestine was demonstrated through his support for our prisoners, his participation in the Day of Rage, his call for the International League of People's struggle to advance our campaigns, and his love for our revolutionary poetry. His clarity on and contributions to our movement will forever be cherished and will continue to echo throughout our struggle. Joma spoke to how deeply our liberation is intertwined with one another, politically and materially. Today, in the presence of our comrades, as a proud member of the International League of People's Struggle, we feel the great power of unity that Ka Joma continuously reminded us to strive for. His unwavering, lifelong dedication and commitment to the struggle will carry on his work under the umbrella of international solidarity, and more tangibly through our work in ILPS. Joma's death marks a moment of change and a passing of the torch with a fire that will never stop burning. As Palestinians, we honor our martyrs through our deeds. Their photos remain plastered along the walls of our cities. Their names remain fresh on our lips. We immortalize our martyrs through our continued resistance. It is our duty to continue the struggle they gave the ultimate sacrifice for. In this spirit, Ka Joma lives as his contributions to the world proletariat revolution and the international anti-imperialist movement continue to guide our struggles. The revolution will not die with his passing because the reasons for people's resistance remain. Today is Palestinian Martyrs' Day. And today we mourn the passing and we celebrate the life of Ka Joma alongside our comrades and alongside Palestinian martyrs as if he is our leader and our martyr, because he is. While the loss of Ka Joma has been painful, he has buried a seed. The seed has been planted in lands far beyond the Philippines, and his legacy not only lives on, but grows through the international struggle for liberation, including the liberation of Palestine. He has buried a seed of revolution that will grow eternally in the heart of our struggle. Mabuhay Ka Joma and long live international solidarity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Boulette. And long live the fires of all our revolutionary martyrs, and from Palestine to the Philippines, and the US war machine. Next, I want to pass it on to a representative from the International Action Center. So I'll pass it on now to RJ, who, along with representing the IAC, also helped to organize the first unionized Starbucks store with Workers United, Starbucks Workers United in Buffalo, New York. So RJ, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this time to pay our respects. On behalf of the International Action Center, I would like to pay a heartfelt tribute to Comrade Jose Maria Sison. He is surely one of the greatest revolutionary leaders of our lifetime. His teachings hugely inspirational to young activists, organizers, and fighters for our class for many decades during his lifetime and for many, many more to come. I've been aware of the legacy surrounding Jose Maria Sison through the waves made around the world by the Filipino National Liberation Movement in the articles that I came across about the struggle. But I started being more closely acquainted recently through my association with the International League of People's Struggle, organized years ago by Jose Maria Sison, which has taken on a life of its own. I can see the legacy of Joma live and breathe through the many young ILPS organizers that I've had the pleasure to meet and learn from. The in-depth conversations about mass work and social investigation I found particularly useful in my own organizing with Starbucks Workers United, and it has been delightful to see the ILPS being more closely linked with the struggle at the Starbucks picket lines over the last few months. The quality of this generation of organizers would not have been possible without the exemplary leadership like Comrade Joma. Jose Maria Sison was a prolific thinker and writer, keeping lit the flame of revolutionary Marxism, a tool without which we could not understand the world that we're in or our fight in it. He stood firmly as an anti-imperialist, in diligent opposition to US wars and the encroachment of empire. He embodied true internationalism, organizing for unity of workers and oppressed people of the whole world together in one struggle against our common enemies. He built confidence in people's war and reminded the whole world that our class always has a fighting chance. Long live international solidarity. Long live Comrade Joma.
Thank you so much, RJ. Long live international solidarity. Long live the workers and oppressed of all countries of the world. Next, I will pass it on to a statement from New York Puerto Rico Resistance. So I'll pass it over to Rafael Augusto Miranda. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having us today. It truly is an honor. I'll be reading the statement that New York Puerto Rico Resistance has written on behalf of our organization. New York Puerto Rico Resistance sends our deepest condolences to the Kasama Julie de Lima and family, friends, and comrades of Jose Maria Sison, who sadly passed away on the 16th of December, 2022. We mourn alongside our Kasamas and the world as we lose an international fighter of imperialism and a genuine proletarian leader. As the founding chairperson of the Communist Party of the Philippines, it was the vigor of his comrades and himself which led to the establishment of the path for the People's Democratic Revolution in the Philippines. It is this valor that has uplifted the most oppressed in Philippine society and continues to push for genuine change, even as many face the onslaught of fascist attacks perpetrated by the United States puppet Philippine government, now under another Marcos regime. The Philippines has been a symbol of hope as they have persevered through the collapse of the Soviet Union and China's revisionism. There are many vital lessons for the anti-imperialist proletarian movement around the world to learn from Ka Joma's life and writings today. The Communist Party of the Philippines was created with a small group of dedicated cadres, including Kasama Joma, whose clear and objective insight and fearlessness to struggle caused them to challenge and break with the old revisionist ways. The youth at the time saw the way forward was through a dedication to the science of Marxism, Leninism, and later Maoism, and pursued it knowing they were going against the grain of many elders and others who did not want to rectify their revisionism. Despite his incarceration, his torture, and even throughout his exile, he never wavered from continuing in the struggle, but only became more steadfast. For many organizers today, we must follow his example of fearless struggle against wrong ideas and reviewing the mistakes of the history of our movements and assure that we correct errors once they are made. And above all else, we must remain humble and not be above criticism. For the colonies and semi-colonies of the world, we must continue to wage our struggle following the direction of correct ideas and never waver or sacrifice our principles. These lessons from Ka Joma strike fear in the hearts of the imperialists and the exploiters, which is why even in his death, they cannot rest but continue their smear campaign of lies, as we see through the reactionary forces on social media of Marcos and Duterte trolls flooding in the comment section of organization statements with state propaganda. They attempt to demonize Professor Sison, believing that his passing will lead to the destruction of the movement, but they are incorrect, as the revolutionary spirit instilled by Joma and his comrades still burns bright, not only in the Filipino people, but in all freedom-loving people worldwide, and will continue to do so for generations to come. Because Ka Joma knew the struggle for national democracy in the Philippines did not belong to any one man, but that both the struggle and the future victory belong to the masses. Through the spirit of proletarian internationalism demonstrated by Sison, the international proletariat movement has only grown stronger, and the formation of the International League of People's Struggle in a time where unipolarity was tightly under US grip signifies this. Refusing to succumb to the popular sectarianism amongst many leftists in the world today, the League is a representation of the kind of broad anti-imperialist unity needed to win. Through the League, many anti-imperialists around the world are united in their fight and in their solidarity with one another, and has given a platform for people's movements around the world, which are often not heard, to raise their voice alongside others for the cause against imperialism and all forms of aggression, while ensuring the democracy of each organization to wage their struggle in the way which they see fit. His dedication to his people, and also to the proletariat of the world, has inspired people all over the world to join alongside the Filipino people in solidarity with their struggle. And the struggle of the Filipino people has been a spark to inspire many to take up their own anti-colonial and proletariat struggles. For us, as Puerto Ricans and as New York Boricua resistance, we feel a deep solidarity and commitment to our Filipino cousins and have been profoundly inspired and learned so much from their struggle. And in fact, our organization would not exist today without those lessons and that inspiration. Puerto Rico, being the oldest colony in the world, has a shared struggle with the Philippines, both of us colonized by Spain and then turned over to the US. And through this, our resistance has not stopped. From the Huk Balahap and the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party to the New People's Army and Los Macheteros, resistance from both Filipino and Boricua organizations have persisted. The US is losing control over their neoliberal imperialist gains, and the internal contradictions of the country have only intensified. Although we lost a comrade, let us remember that we have a world to gain, and it is within our reach. May we honor Ka Joma through upholding his revolutionary optimism. With all our love, we give a red salute to Comrade Sison for all his contributions. To end, we want to quote Professor Sison: "You may die without seeing the socialist revolution, but so long as you are ready to die in the course of the struggle, then you are not afraid. Makibaka huwag matakot, Sison presente, Ka Joma lives. Long live international solidarity." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raphael. The Ka Joma lives. And as you mentioned, the revolution never belongs to one man. It belongs to the people. So from the Philippines to Puerto Rico, we will fight and not be afraid in Ka Joma's memory. Thank you. Next, we'll hear a message from People Organizing for Philippine Solidarity, or POPS. So I'll pass it over to Adriana Rogers.
Thank you so much. Like Cody said, I'm an organizer with People Organizing for Philippine Solidarity, or POPS, here in Portland, Oregon. We are a member of the Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle, or FFPS, which is a global network united to support the Filipino people in their struggle for genuine democracy, freedom, and national and social liberation. We join the Filipino people and anti-imperialists across the globe in offering the highest salute to the memory of Jose Maria Sison. In the past year, POPS formed as an organization because a group of us as non-Filipinos saw the call from FFPS to publicly support the revolution in the Philippines and promote the program of the National Democratic Front of the Philippines as an important and necessary contribution to the global weakening of US imperialism and in upholding the democratic rights of the Filipino people. Joma helped establish the NDFP in 1973. For those who aren't familiar, the NDFP is the Revolutionary United Front organization of the Filipino people fighting for national freedom and for the democratic rights of the people, struggling to end the rule of US imperialism and its local allies, carrying out genuine agrarian reform, and establishing a true people's democratic government in the countryside. The NDFP is made up of 18 allied organizations, including the CPP, the NPA, and 16 revolutionary mass organizations, comprised of different classes and sectors of society, such as workers, peasants, youth, women, Christians, and indigenous peoples. As a member of the Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle, we look to the historical contributions of Ka Joma towards revolution in the Philippines, being the founding chairperson of the CPP in 1968, a founder of the NPA in 1969, and establisher of the NDF in 1973. For 25 years, Joma was chief political consultant of the NDFP negotiating panel, representing the interests of the Filipino people and the revolutionary movement in peace negotiations with the government of the Republic of the Philippines. You know, as an organization of non-Filipinos organizing in solidarity with the revolution in the Philippines, we're often asked, why do we organize in solidarity with the Philippines? And for me, once I learned about the conditions of peasants, the landlessness of workers, of exploitation in the Philippines, it was impossible to not see the necessity and justness of the struggle of the Filipino people for freedom by any means necessary. And learning about the role of Joma in the struggle, I see him as a shining example of what it means to be an internationalist, to see the national struggles of workers and peasants for freedom as part of the worldwide struggle for freedom from exploitation and oppression. So if you feel called to action from today, please join us in the Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle, in supporting the mass movement of all oppressed peoples of the Philippines in their aspiration for national and social liberation. And to uphold Joma's legacy is to give everything we can to showing solidarity with the revolution in the Philippines and defending the movement and aspirations of the people on all fronts from any attacks. Ka Joma lives. Long live the National Democratic Front of the Philippines.
Okay. Thank you so much, Adriana. So great to hear from a comrade and friend on Ka Joma's legacy. Adriana spoke on the National Democratic Front of the Philippines and how all sectors and classes of Philippine society are actually represented in that united front. Joma's contribution to the Philippine Revolution and the global anti-imperialist movement included his recognition of the roles of all the various sectors of society. He spoke and wrote on the critical role that the youth play with their energy, knowing that they are the most eager to learn and the least conservative in their thinking. He also knew that women, in holding up half the sky, play an important role in the struggle against imperialism, in building the people's movement, and in the struggle for democratic rights. Next up, we have a series of videos highlighting Ka Joma's contributions to the theory and practice of revolution in some of these critical sectors. After some recorded words from Ka Joma himself, we'll hear a recorded message from Adrian Bonifacio, chair of Anakbayan USA, a recorded message from Pixie Castillo of Gabriela USA, and a recorded message from Azra Saeed, chair of the International Women's Alliance.
And to their stay in Europe. You must uphold the national sovereignty of the Filipino people by asserting national independence and opposing imperialist domination, and to unite the people and build their collective strength, anchored in the basic alliance of the workers and peasants as the foundation for establishing the people's democratic state, which shall uphold civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. You must contribute what you can in order to build a self-reliant and progressive Philippine economy in repudiation of the imperialist and feudal stranglehold of the economy. Carry out national industrialization and genuine land reform, and ensure the people's economic and social well-being, and thus liberate the people from poverty, raise their standard of living, attain full employment, guarantee adequate and humane working and social conditions, and better standards for health, education, and housing. You must stand for a patriotic, scientific, and mass-oriented people's culture, which seeks to break the colonial, feudal, patriarchal, and bourgeois decadent culture that impedes social progress and people's participation in the movement for national and social liberation, to uphold the right to self-determination of the Moro people, the Cordillera people, the Lumad, and other national minorities, and support their struggle against national oppression and the right to own and utilize their ancestral lands and other natural resources. You must fight for women's liberation by destroying the basis of national, class, and gender oppression, and you must promote the participation of women, principally worker and peasant women, in the women's liberation movement that is vital, distinct, and integral to the entire national democratic struggle. You must engage the young men and women and avail of their openness to revolutionary change and their energy to advance the national democratic movement. You must participate actively in building international solidarity that is anti-imperialist and democratic. Develop the closest relations with the workers and other oppressed peoples and with their organizations and movements, and engage in mutual support and cooperation in the common struggle against imperialism and all forms of reaction, and for just peace and all-round development of all peoples. The theme of your assembly is highly important and urgent. Magkaisa, labanan ng pasistang rehimeng US-China Duterte.
Yes. Tito, historically, what roles have the youth played in the Philippine Revolution?
The Filipino youth have a great tradition in spearheading the Philippine Revolution. In the old democratic revolution of 1896, Andres Bonifacio and Emilio Jacinto were young members of the working class and the intelligentsia. They were motivated by liberal democratic ideas and were determined to end the colonial and feudal rule of Spain over the Philippines and the Filipino people. Likewise, those who initiated the resumption of the new democratic revolution by re-establishing the Communist Party of the Philippines in 1968 and founding the New People's Army in 1969 were young men and women from the toiling masses of workers and peasants and the urban petty bourgeoisie. They were guided by the theory of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and were determined to carry out the new democratic and socialist stages of the Philippine Revolution under the class leadership of the proletariat.
Tito, what is the role of the youth in the revolution in our present time? In what way can we help in the struggle in the city, most especially in the countrysides?
The role of the youth is to raise the level of their revolutionary consciousness, organize themselves, and mobilize themselves for various forms of struggle in order to advance the people's just cause of realizing full national independence, democracy, social justice, economic development through genuine land reform, and the attainment and national industrialization, and the attainment of a national, scientific, and pro-people culture. The youth can start belonging to the main youth organization and other forms of organization that are characterized by youth participation. When they join the Revolutionary Party of the Proletariat, the scope of responsibility for the young cadres expands in terms of so many types of organizations to lead and types of work to carry out. Work that is directly related to the armed revolution is of course done in the underground and the urban areas and in the countryside where there is more space for maneuver to build the revolutionary forces like the Communist Party, the New People's Army, the mass organizations, and the organs of political power.
Okay, thank you for sharing those videos. Our tech team, in the spirit of raising the revolutionary consciousness of the youth, will go to a recorded message from Anakbayan USA's chairperson, Adrian Bonifacio. Anakbayan USA is an overseas chapter of Anakbayan Philippines, youth and student organization, national democratic mass organization with a socialist perspective.
The entirety of Anakbayan USA
raises our fists in the highest tribute to the great proletarian revolutionary and internationalist Ka Joma Sison. We also express our deepest sympathies to Ka Juli de Lima, his comrades in the Netherlands, and the Filipino masses for this great loss. Before the victory of the People's Democratic Revolution in China, Mao Zedong told the youth gathered at Yan'an, "How should we judge whether a youth is a revolutionary? How can we tell?" Mao answered, "There can only be one criterion, namely, whether or not they are willing to integrate themselves with the broad masses of workers and peasants and do so in practice. If they are willing to do so, and actually do so, they are a revolutionary." Ka Joma's life was an embodiment of this message. He was only 25 when he founded the Kabataang Makabayan, which oriented the youth and student movement to serve and struggle alongside the working masses. He was only 30 when he abandoned life in the city to organize a people's army among the peasants in the countryside. And even after being imprisoned, even after being tortured, even after being exiled from his own homeland, Ka Joma made the same decision every day, not only to dedicate himself to the workers and peasants in words, but also in action. Ka Joma believed in the revolutionary potential and necessity of a youth and student movement linked with the struggle of the toiling masses. And Ka Joma believed in us, in Anak Bayan USA, as we fought to build that movement here in the belly of the US imperialist beast. He reminded us in 2019 at our third National Congress, even as you are Filipino youth in the USA, you are in a position to make significant contributions to the Filipino people's national democratic movement in the motherland. He urged us to increase our membership and political strength among the Filipino youth and students in various cities and workplaces, communities and institutions where Filipinos are to be found. He asked us to persevere in raising further our educational, political, and organizational strength to a new and higher level. Just a few months after Ka Joma shared these calls with us, the pandemic pulled society further into a deep health and economic crisis. I am sure I am not alone when I say that it has not been an easy time to organize the youth. Students struggled to learn virtually, with many forced to stop their education because they simply did not have the means to access it online, and because of the need to work to sustain their families. Working youth were exposed every day to the dangers of COVID-19 with no protections in sight. Isolation, anxiety, and depression suffocated youth as imperialist and neoliberal responses to the pandemic offered no end goal in sight. And yet, with these crises, there has been no better time than now to build the revolutionary youth and student movement. Ka Joma reminded us that not only are we living today in a world of crises, but that we are also in the midst of radical choice. And time again, the youth have chosen to resist. From Black youth who organized the Great Rebellion across the United States in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and so many others, to the young martyrs of the Palestinian Liberation Movement, whose names fill our hearts with grief and fighting spirit every day, to the young activists who dedicated their all to see the Filipino people free, Teacher Chad, Teacher Jerain, Amado Kaya, and all those who continue to fight face to face against the fascist Marcos regime. Ka Joma, in your last words to us in 2019, you challenged us to raise our revolutionary consciousness, to get organized and act in concert with others through meetings, through protest mass actions, in response to the crying needs and demands of the people. We still have much to learn, much to grow, to reach the vision of the vibrant youth and student movement you entrusted us with building here. But each day, we have taken the steps to offer more of ourselves. Our lasting tribute to you will be to show the world the best of the youth, to raise high the banner of militant struggle for the national and social liberation of the people, and to contribute all we can to the invincible people's movement and its inevitable victory. Mabuhay si Ka Joma, mabuhay ang pambansang demokratikong kilusan, mabuhay ang kabataang lumalaban.
My name is Pixie Castillo. I'm the National Deputy Secretary General of Gabriela USA. And on behalf of Gabriela USA, we give our highest tribute and deepest condolences for all who knew Jose Maria Sison, their family, and the Filipino people in mourning the great loss of a beloved revolutionary, teacher, and father. Ka Joma's contributions from the 60s to now shows the depth of their work and continuous dedication to the advancement of the struggle for national democracy. Their firm dedication to the cause of liberating the Filipino people from all forms of oppression and class exploitation, his selfless dedication of his life to pursue the liberation of the working class, is an endless wellspring of inspiration to the struggling peoples of the world that a better society, a better world is possible and already on its way. Ka Joma continued political analysis throughout his lifetime helped pave the way for the formation of organizations that serve as collective aspiration of struggling peoples to achieve liberation, like national democratic organizations and like Gabriela. In all these organizations, Ka Joma has contributed important political analysis on waging people's resistance and revolution. For the militant women's movement in the Philippines, Ka Joma's formidable and succinct analysis of the women question, that women experience a distinct double-bind oppression as women and as members of their class, and that the path to women's liberation lies in the participation of women from the peasant, worker, and other patriotic classes in the people's struggle, provides timeless clarity to the political struggle for women's liberation that must be integral to people's liberation, and as an important tool against the idealism of so-called second wave feminisms of the 1970s, and how women as a supraclass concept and social category has been wielded by reaction and counter-revolutionaries to derail women from taking the revolutionary path. In his last message to Gabriela on their Congress in August 2022, Ka Joma reminded us that the National Democratic Mass Movement is fast gaining strength and that the Gabriela National Alliance is making significant contributions to this movement. And he urged us to continue doing our best and to make greater achievements to arouse, organize, and mobilize Filipino women and the entire people in the Philippines and abroad to contribute the most that it can to the people's democratic revolution and engage in the support of our fellow women in all types of countries in the world. For women have a common cause in fighting for national liberation, democracy, and socialism against imperialism and all reaction. In Ka Joma's life and in his passing, reactionaries and enemies of the working class people have and will try to persecute Ka Joma and invalidate his legacy. Let them waste their time. To the Filipino working class and all oppressed peoples around the world, Ka Joma's life's work and fierce dedication to putting theory to practice will continue to move people because he has given us the true analysis of our realities and aspiration for genuine liberation. Ka Joma is the hero of the people. His life and sacrifices will live on in the history of our struggle and continues to give us revolutionary courage to continue until victory. Ka Joma lives.
I am Azrat Allah Said, the Vice Chair of International League of People's Struggle. It is very difficult to speak of Comrade Joma. To pay tribute to a revolutionary and a revolutionary such as Ka Joma, it is hard to find the words to do so. Ka Joma, a man so full of life, so simple, so approachable, that it was hard to relate him to the revolutionary he was, to the revolutionary vision he gave to the society, to all the oppressed and the exploited masses of the world. It is through Comrade Joma's unshakable belief in toppling the rapist, brutal system of capitalism that thousands upon thousands have walked unflinchingly the hard, difficult road to revolution. Ka Joma lives. Ka Joma lives because the spirit of revolution lives. It not only lives, it has increased its pace, its strength to defeat imperialism. Ka Joma lives. Ka Joma lives because we have learned to laugh and fight. We have learned to wear the mantle of struggle. We have learned the substance of hardship, all through watching the life of Ka Joma. Ka Joma lives because his writings give us a concrete pathway to wage our own struggles against monopoly capitalism, against wars of aggression, and against the true enemies of the people. Ka Joma lives because when imperialism thought it had mainstream revisionism, he exposed the treacherous enemies and once again inspired us to stand up and fight. He gave us the vision to build our strength to fight against imperialist war and plunder, to fight for genuine liberation, and to fight for a classless society, fight for just and lasting peace. It is all because of this that Ka Joma lives.
Ka Joma lives. Thank you, Azra, Pixie, and Adrian, and all of your organizations for contributing to this tribute today. Now it's really, truly an incredible honor for me to introduce Ka Joma's beloved wife, comrade, life partner, Julie de Lima. Tita Julie, I know it's very late for you in the Netherlands, so thank you so much for joining us. I'll pass it off to you. Ka Julie, are you still with us? Okay, we may be having some technical problems from the Netherlands, so we'll come back to you if you're still with us. Ka Julie, thank you so much for joining us and being with us today. Before we close out, I do want to remind everyone here who's still with us, first of all, you can still use the Q&A box, the chat box, to send any words of tribute, of inspiration that you've taken from this webinar today, from this tribute. And I also want to remind folks that all of us as grassroots community organizers, we do this on a volunteer basis, strictly out of love for the people, for the masses, and for our communities. And it takes some funds to be able to do that. And so if you feel called to support the work of the people's organizations that are sponsoring this event, the Zoom accounts, everything else, the travel that's required for this work, you can send a donation on Venmo to @ILPS-US. That's @ILPS-US, and maybe we can get that in the chat box. There it is. Thank you, moderator. Just want to check in again. Ka Julie, are you with us tonight? Okay. If we can come back to Ka Julie, it will be great to hear from you. Otherwise, I think we can start to close out. We have a closing cultural we wanted to offer. Early on in the program, Berna mentioned Ka Joma's Lolo humor and his the joy that he brought to so many different spaces. as so many of us, I'm sure, know, Ka Joma loved to sing karaoke. His love for singing and for being with people was also a way of integrating with the masses and joining them in their celebrations. And so Ka Joma, one of his favorites that many of us might know and love is really, it's a classic popular song by Frank Sinatra, but of course, with Joma's Lolo humor. So it is Mao's way as opposed to my way. So we'll hear from Ka Joma singing Mao's way.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, I've traveled each and every highway, but more, much more than this, I did it Mao's way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and so it's true, without exemption. I plan each charted course, each careful step along the byway, but more, much more than this, I did it Mao's way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall and did it Mao's way. I've loved, I've laughed and cried, I've had my fill, my share of losing, and now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, not me. I did it Mao's way. For what is a man? What has he got, if not himself? Then he has not to say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows and did it my way.
Yes, and with that, I think we can hear in the singing and see in his face the decisiveness and dedication that Joma brought to every aspect of his life. Truly beautiful, truly beautiful. He came to revolutionary work. He came to his life always trying his best. And as he said, even in that song, he has only had a few regrets, too few to even mention. One thing that he said was that I always try my best. I have no regrets in devoting my life to revolutionary work. The only regret that I have is not being able to do more work for the revolutionary cause. And so with that, I want to encourage comrades, friends, family, everyone here on this webinar today to continue to live that inspiration of Ka Joma's life, of his struggle, his militancy, but also his humor and joy and revolutionary optimism. Bring all of that to the work that we have to do in bringing down imperialism, in fighting for our democratic rights, in struggling for a better world, a better future, a brighter future in socialism. So with that, I want to say, long live the memory of Jose Maria Sison. Long live the militant struggle of the Filipino people for national liberation. Long live proletarian internationalism. And I hope you can all join me in saying, Ka Joma lives.
Ka Joma lives.
Ka Joma lives.
Ka Joma
Joma lives.
Ka Joma lives.
Joma lives.
Joma lives.
Ka Joma lives.
lives.
Ka
Joma lives.
Thank you so much, everyone all across the globe for joining us today. Long live the militant struggle of the Filipino people for national liberation. Good afternoon, good evening. Take care.